Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. I'm going to introduce you tonight to one of the most impressive individuals I've had the privilege of meeting. Her name is Dr. Eva Klein. She is a corporate and clinical psychologist. She has been a professor at several different universities, including the departments of psychiatry and behavioral neurosciences at McMaster University, the Haskell School of Business at the University of Calgary, and she was a fellow at the London Business School. She has a website called UBVisible.com, which focuses on combating ageism and focus on issues to do with resilient aging. I've had the privilege of dining with her and hearing her speak at the DeGroote School of Business, McMaster University, and she is incredible. She has spoken about relationships. She's spoken about figuring out what you want to do in your career and life. I have found her to be one of the deepest thinking, most wonderful people I've had the privilege of interacting with in my life, and I just wish I could spend more time with her. But tonight, we're going to talk primarily about ageism. Dr. Klein, Eva, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Brian, and thank you for that very generous introduction and elaborate introduction. I feel quite humbled. And thank you.
Well, it's not elaborate because it's completely honest. You have been a wonderful counselor, even from the stage, but as well when we've been having lunch or sat at a table together at an event. So thank you for your counsel, for your advice, for your encouraging thoughts, etc. But tell me, if you could, why are you so passionate right now about the issue of ageism?
Well, partly because I've stepped down as a professor in the Department of Psychiatry for about 10 years, and I'm thinking about what is next. And I am myself wondering what is next. And one of the things that I see is that as we age, we become more invisible. And I don't like that. And I am personally not ready to retire. So at the age of 77, Brian, I'm telling you my age, I have decided to launch into a new venture.
Excellent. Well, I'm sure that you'll have a big impact. So ageism is actually a big issue right now in the United States, primarily because you've got a 77-year-old and an 82-year-old running for president. Do you think that age is an issue that should be talked about in a presidential election, or and is Nikki Haley right in that regard, or is she wrong to raise the issue?
Well, I think it's a cheap shot, really. I had said to myself I wasn't going to talk about politics, but in fact, Biden's performance is bringing up the concept of ageism because he's lost his cognitive acuity a couple of times, and it could happen to any of us. But when you're 82, it's so easy to say that it's your age. Maybe it isn't. It happens to me, it happens to you, it happens to much younger people. But when you're running for president, you want to make sure that the person that's in power is pretty sharp. And he has been, in fact, in a lot of ways in the past. And Nikki Haley is using it to her political advantage, for sure.
So you say you become invisible as you age. What do you mean by that?
Well, you become invisible in the sense that you go to a corner store, for example, and a clerk is serving you, and all of a sudden somebody much younger, perhaps a more attractive younger woman, comes by and you're ignored. You go to events and you get ignored. You somehow don't have the appeal because of your age. I'm sure your audience of people over 60 have experienced that. I had an interesting experience about a year ago where I was at a party with three much younger couples, and one of the women had convinced me to attend and stay. And I decided that I would stay, but then I noticed these three couples were completely excluding me. They weren't including me in their conversation. And the temptation for me was to seize and get angry. But I decided I wouldn't do that. I decided I would take agency. I take charge of myself and the situation. And they were talking about extroversion and introversion. And I decided I would intervene. And what I said is, guys, you probably don't know this, but I'm a Myers-Briggs certified trainer in extroversion and introversion. And let me tell you a little bit about the latest research on that. Anyway, by getting myself into the conversation, I was now part of the group. So it's very important when you are invisible to do something about it.
And so is that what your suggestion would be in regards to what can be done to be more visible as you age, that you just interject in conversations, that you get involved?
Well, that's one of the things for sure that you should do, is not let it just pass you by. You really need to step up to the plate. But there's other things that we can do to become invisible. To become visible, rather. And one of the major ways is to use fashion as a way to be visible. It's a powerful way to be visible to yourself and to others. And because fashion is far more than clothes. Clothes are something you put on just to cover yourself. And what you wear is going to make you feel better, dress better, feel better. And that's very important. You don't, for example, see Jennifer Lopez dressing for comfort. No, she dresses for pizzazz. And I've been doing a number of talks at Le Musée des Beaux-Arts in Montreal, Art Gallery of Hamilton, and just recently on Cable 14 television in Hamilton. And I've been so gratified to see how the audience responds. I have some of these women say to me, well, let me go back into my wardrobe. You're right. We shouldn't be wearing our jogging pants. We should be dressing for impact. And when I say dress for impact, what I'm saying, it takes effort. It's not dressing for comfort, it's dressing for effort. And a little bit about men. I think men do the same things. Brian, I noticed you're not wearing a jacket today. And I think personally, I think men have to think about what they're going to wear as well, because they can become invisible. It's okay to wear jogging pants and a hoodie some of the time, but when you want to say something important and you want to be noticed, I think men have to think about what they're wearing as well.
You know, that's interesting. I wear a jacket to work every day. Often it's a sports jacket, not a suit jacket, because suits,
that's okay.
Suits just don't seem to be the wear unless I'm downtown at a bank meeting or something like that. But I feel different when I've got a jacket on. I feel more confident. I'm not sure if you watched the Grammys, which was 2 weeks ago or so.
Yes, I did.
Oprah Winfrey was introducing a tribute to Tina Turner. And she said that Tina Turner told her at one point in time, get dressed for dinner, even if you're on your own, because you'll feel better. And so I thought it was amazing that Tina Turner's advice to Oprah Winfrey was to get dressed for dinner every night.
Right. I think COVID-19 has really lowered the bar in terms of dressing. I know some people have dressed, and we've been on so many excuse me, Zoom meetings, that it was easy sometimes to just dress up to the waist and not worry about what was beyond the waist because we'd never see it. But it certainly makes one feel better if one is dressed, even for oneself.
I found that, males and females waited longer before they got their hair cut or done. And for females that colored their hair, waited longer to color their hair, that everyone sort of put things on hold for a while. And it did impact us. And it was sort of like we were dressing down. We were casual Fridays all week long. That may have been relaxing, and it may have been what we needed for a while. And we need to stay home, but it did impact, I think, confidence levels.
Yeah, but one of the interesting things that happened during COVID, because of all the Zoom meetings, I've heard from plastic surgeons that the amount of plastic surgery has tripled after COVID.
Really? That's interesting.
Isn't that funny? So
more focus on the face.
Yeah, we're just looking at our face, and all of a sudden we're seeing little lines and we're seeing things we don't like. And plastic surgery has boomed as a result of that.
I think ageism is a big issue. And it certainly is a political issue right now in the United States, also in Canada, but also in the workplace. I think it's a major issue in the workplace. I've had the opportunity recently to interview Frank Stronach, who's in his 90s.
Yes.
And Jim Pattison, who's in his 90s. And I spent a lot of time with my mother, who sadly passed away recently. And she had this attitude that I loved. And it's sort of a line on an adaptation on the old line about you don't stop dancing when you get old. You get old when you stop dancing. She used to say, Brian, you don't stop playing bridge when you get old. You get old when you stop playing bridge. You got to keep your mind really active. And I met with Jim Pattison, who's in his 90s. And he said, Brian, never stop doing deals, because when you stop doing deals, you'll stop growing, you'll stop challenging yourself, and you won't have anything to live for anymore. And he's doing deals into his mid-90s.
Well, do you know Giorgio Armani at 89 refuses to give up his fashion empire? Warren Buffett is going strong at 93. So all these people refuse to retire. When I was a VP of HR, quite a few years ago, the big deal was to put in succession plans for CEOs and companies, and they hardly ever worked. And the reason they didn't work is that a lot of these CEOs sabotaged them. They didn't really want to retire at all. And we were making them retire, and they were damn well convinced they weren't going to make it work.
But isn't one of the indications of a good leader is someone who can train someone to take over?
Well, what about the examples I've given you about Warren Buffett? I suppose theoretically you should be able to and want to replace yourself. But lots of times you don't want to. You feel you're still very competent in spite of that. Now, my husband just stepped down from being the dean at the DeGroote School of Business after having been a dean for, altogether maybe about 12 years. And I've been impressed by how generous he is in terms of his advice to the new dean. And I've complimented him on it. I've said, it's just so wonderful. He said, well, I don't want him to fail. I want the good work that I've put in to continue under his leadership. So it depends, Brian.
But that is excellent. There are examples, and there's a famous example in the press every day about Disney, for an example, where the retiring CEO almost tried to destroy the successive CEO. Anyway, we got to take a break for some messages, and we're going to come back with Eva Klein, Dr. Eva Klein, in just 2 minutes, and we're going to really delve into this issue of ageism in a little bit more detail. And I am going to use the break to go put my sports jacket on, since I've been told by Dr. Klein that I should have worn a jacket today. Stay with us, everyone. Back in 2 minutes.
Oh.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. My guest tonight is Dr. Eva Klein. She's a corporate and clinical psychologist. She's been a professor at several universities, including the departments of psychiatry and behavioral neurosciences at McMaster University. I've had the opportunity to have lunch and to dine at different events with Dr. Klein, hear her speak from the stage on, I think your speech was, or your talk was, about sort of what's next, but it was about career progressions and things like that at the time, not necessarily just about ageism. And I've really found you to be wonderful in your presentations and your thinking and your advice. So thank you for that. And for those on the radio, please, you won't see, but I've taken the liberty during the break to put my jacket on, since I was scolded by Dr. Klein that I didn't have my jacket on. So I do now have a jacket on. Dr. Klein, what is UB Visible?
UB Visible is a website that I've launched to help people 65 and older be visible. So one of the things we have is we have 2 Facebook communities, and you can join these. You will accept you as a member. And what we want to do is create a community of individuals where they can share some of the challenges they have in terms of being UB visible. They can provide support for each other, and we can also provide some interesting articles on what is current in the whole longevity literature, and there's a lot of it around. So that is what UB Visible is. I will also be doing some podcasts myself on topics of interest, and also inviting experts to share their wisdom and expertise on this platform.
What is ageism?
Well, ageism is the discrimination and negative stereotypes that people feel as they get older. And this is an interesting thing. Like, how old is old? They asked ARP did a very cute video in which they asked millennials what they thought was old. And some of them thought that 40 was old, 50 was old. So the age is really partly dependent on how old you are. At 40, maybe 70 seems old, but at 20, 40 might seem old. And ageism is connected with all sorts of negative connotations. For example, in the media, we see ageism in the sense that you're considered only attractive if you're young, so that is changing. And we certainly see it in fashion. And we see that older bodies are not admired or respected. And this turns into the way we think about sex for older people. For younger people, the idea of older people having sex is usually yuck. Somehow that isn't acceptable. Sex should only be the domain of the young, which is absolutely not true. If you look at the rising rate of STDs in retirement homes, we certainly know that older people are having sex, and very often unprotected sex.
I ended up touring a place just south of Ocala, north of Orlando, called The Villages, which is a fairly sizable seniors area of numerous different residential developments. And I was told that it's the highest incidence of sexually transmitted diseases in North America.
Isn't that wonderful? That is, because sex is actually really good for your health and for longevity. First of all, it's great exercise, which is very important for longevity. It relaxes you, it relieves stress, and it also gives you a dopamine kick. Sexual activity is to be encouraged in older people, whatever that means, because there are certain physical limitations that people have and experience as they get older. But really what we're talking about is physical intimacy more than anything. And that is essential to age well.
Well, you know, I think I've seen study after study that says the people that are in healthy relationships actually live longer and live happily longer. I'm not sure if I've seen them in regards to sex as well, but it makes sense that romantic relationships and physical intimacy probably go along. What is ageism in the workplace?
Well, ageism in the workplace is being discriminated against, doing certain kinds of work in the workplace. For example, being given an office, being moved to an office that doesn't have a window, being excluded from a lunch because of your age. People just somehow don't want to deal with you, given less important work and having some of your accomplishments minimized. So that is ageism. Now, discrimination in the workplace is considered illegal. It's only accountants, lawyers, and other professions who signed a contract as they came in that they would retire. They are allowed to let people go at age 65, but generally it happens in spite of our legislation. So
So you think people are forced out after 65 or after a certain age, people are forced out even though that's not appropriate?
Well, they have been, but things are changing. We have a labor shortage. And I was just talking at CD Howe's, a think tank, and the question that I was asked is, what should employers do to keep older workers in the workforce? Brian, what do you think the number of people, the percentage of people between the ages of 65 and 74 are working?
I don't know. I have no idea. What is that number?
What do you think?
50%, 25%, something like that.
25%, exactly. That is according to a Pew Research. 25% of people are working, but lots more people want to work. And it's actually good for your health to keep engaged, because working gives you a sense of camaraderie. So besides the wealth, it is actually good for your health as well. You know, one of the things that you can do to keep older workers engaged is to give them self-esteem, joint mentoring. That's a very important part of it. One of our friends who isn't working quite that hard loves teaching one course at the University of Toronto because it says it gives him a chance to interact with younger people, and intergenerational collaboration, I think, is the way it's going these days. Somebody at Wharton called Morin Guillen, I hope I've pronounced his name right, has written a book called Perennials. And in it, he says we have to stop the linear model of generations. That actually generations aren't all the same, like millennials aren't all the same, Gen Zs aren't the same. And actually, there's a lot more similarity among different generations than there are within generations. Let me give you an example. For example, Deloitte has now decided that they are going to take people of different ages BMW has teams where there are several different generations, and they find their work is far more effective. So diverse teams really work, and they benefit everybody.
That's fascinating. I think it is important for health, but it's important for economic, stability, for economic life. I interviewed someone who's written a really fascinating book about over 50 and faking it. And I don't know if this statistic is correct, but this is a statistic she had in her book and she quoted on the show, that 50% of the people between the ages of 55 and 65 lose their jobs, and that 50% of them end up 5 years later being impoverished. And so, her argument was that that a lot of people, because of ageism or because of technology, because of whatever, end up losing their jobs, not over 65 and not being forced because of, retirement ages or anything like that, but between 55 and 65, losing their positions, and half of them, so 25%, end up 5 years later being impoverished. So economically, it has a huge impact.
It certainly does. And we need those people as well, because we've got a labor shortage and they've got wisdom to share. We were just having dinner with an old friend of ours, Cal Goldman, who is a competition antitrust lawyer. And so he used to work for Blake's, and 65, they made him retire. Then he joined Goodman's. They made him retire. And now at 75, he's opened up his own law firm, and he's attracted a whole bunch of other like-minded people. And he was so pleased. He put it on LinkedIn, and he said within a couple of days, he had 4,000 people telling him how delighted they were that he was starting up his own practice. So it's his wisdom and experience that is valued. Nobody cares how old he is as long as he can do the work. And that is to get to your point, Biden. In fact, is it ageism? Or maybe people are wondering if maybe he's not doing his job anymore. And that can happen at 85 and it can happen at 50.
I read an article in the paper this morning that said that Japan has gone into a recession. Most of Europe has gone into recession. Canada's growth is not great. The United States is the one economy that's doing well from an economic standpoint, and yet the vast majority of Americans feel like there's something going wrong. Yet they're the one country that seems to be doing well from an economic standpoint, and that's Biden economics. And so, why is it that people are questioning his abilities so much when, frankly, he's probably galvanized the Western world and NATO together more than anyone has since World War II, and the economy is doing better than any other economy in the world?
Well, I think it has less to do with Biden than the general malaise that we're all feeling in the world. The wars going on in the Ukraine and in Israel and Gaza, Trump, and we're constantly hearing he now owes $325 million. So there's just a real sense of negativity. And I think that tends to predominate the way we feel.
I think it's ageism. I think it's just ageism, pure and simple. The man has the wisdom. The economy is doing well, but because he walks a little stiffly and maybe has a few more senior moments than other people do, there's ageism. And I think that that's inappropriate. I sat down with Jim Pattison, as I mentioned, in the mid-90s, and the man's still doing great deals. Did he ask me the same question a few times? Yes. But you know what? I forget things on a constant basis myself. So, I think that we don't value wisdom. We don't value experience nearly enough. And I think that's ageism.
It is. We segregate older people because of age, and we sometimes underestimate their ability. And it's so easy to point your finger at age and say it has to do with cognitive decline. There's a funny story I want to share with you, Brian. Because of today, I have this acquaintance called Gabor Zinner, and he's a lawyer in Calgary, but mainly at the age of 76, he wins Masters championships in Japan, travels all over the world. And water polo is a very, very serious sport. You've got to be in great shape. And then he wrote me a little note and he said, "You're probably wondering why I'm working full time." And he said, "Well, I just read somewhere that the person who's going to live to be 150 is alive today. It just might be me. So I want to make sure I don't run out of money." So his prospects and his optimism is extraordinary. 150 is pretty good.
The person who's going to live to 150 is alive today. That's
Exactly.
astounding. That's really quite interesting.
And he thinks it's going to be him. Well, he's in fantastic physical shape, so he has a pretty good chance of doing that. But besides being—
And he's 77?
76.
76. I got to tell you, I played water polo when I was a teenager. I can't imagine playing water polo today. You know, you're treading water and lifting yourself out of the water and trying to shoot the ball and trying to tread the water up so you can block a ball and catch a ball. It is absolutely exhausting. I don't know how you could do it at any age, let alone 76.
Right. Well, there's an Irish rower who is 94, and I'm trying to remember his name, and he wins all sorts of championships. And they've tested his heart out. And at 94, he has the cardiovascular strength of a 40-year-old. So physical exercise is really important in terms of maintaining longevity. The other thing that's really important is not thinking of yourself as old. Thinking of yourself as moving on. If you start thinking of yourself as old, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. You think you're old and your back goes out. And you think, okay, that's it, I'm old. It could have been that you just didn't warm up. And it really has nothing to do with your age. But by attributing it to age, you are bringing on poor health onto yourself. So your attitude is essential.
Well, I think that comes back to the idea that you don't stop dancing because you get old. You get old when you stop dancing. You don't stop playing bridge when you get old. You get old when you stop playing bridge. And so keep playing bridge, keep dancing, keep living life to its fullest. And like Jimmy Pattison said, do deals in your 90s because you never want to stop doing deals. We got to take a break for some messages. We're going to be back in 2 minutes with Eva Klein, Dr. Eva Klein, corporate and clinical psychologist, a professor at several different universities, and someone who's just launched a whole website and endeavor on You Be Visible, an anti-ageism effort. Stay with us, everyone. Back in 2 minutes.
And you're going to—
Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. Having a really good conversation tonight with Dr. Eva Klein about ageism. Dr. Klein is a corporate and clinical psychologist. She's been professor at several different universities, including the departments of psychology, psychiatry, and behavioral neurosciences at McMaster University, the School of Business at the University of Calgary, and she was named a fellow at the London Business School. She has recently launched a website, ubvisible.com, which focuses on combating ageism and focuses on issues to do with resilient aging. Dr. Klein, I got to ask you, what your behavioral neurosciences at McMaster University, what is behavioral neurosciences?
Well, one of the things, Brian, that we've learned is we used to think that the brain stopped growing at a certain point. And in fact, that is not true at all. We are capable of developing neurons much later in life. The brain has neuroplasticity. And by neuroplasticity, what I mean is that we are able to regenerate our brain and grow it at any age. You can teach an old dog new tricks, and that's very exciting. But how do you do that is the challenge. And the challenge is that we have to constantly be challenging ourselves to do new things. Many people, when they get older, want to feel comfortable, and that is a mistake, because that is not going to bring on new brain cells. We've got to do new things, learn a new language, get a new skill, keep growing. And that means we're going to feel uncomfortable. We have to embrace that feeling of discomfort to be able to embrace neuroplasticity and keep our brains thriving and current.
That's interesting. I went to a fascinating conversation about dementia, and the doctor was saying that people that are doing Sudoku or crosswords or things like that are helpful, but doing the same test over and over again is not nearly as helpful as trying something new. And so his comment was, if you're playing bridge, try to play mahjong or learn something new. And then also what he said is, don't always do it with other people at your same level. Play it against people that are really far better than you. And he said, which I found really kind of interesting, play it against people that are far worse than you, because teaching somebody something and having the frustration of someone that is not nearly as capable as you playing a game, and you've got to try to teach them, is really helpful. And the social interaction involved in that is incredibly helpful. And so therefore, it is not just challenging your brain with the same thing over again. It's challenging your brain with different things and having the social activity at the same time.
Oh, that is so wise and so brilliant. I find that one of the things I miss right now is not teaching. And I often would joke to my students that I felt I learned more than they did as I was trying to teach them things. So it's right to the point of what you're talking about. Teaching somebody something means that you sort of have to figure out if you really understand it yourself. And that is very, very challenging.
What about people that want to retire?
There are people that do want to retire, because after all, isn't this the end of the road, heaven? This is what we've been waiting for. And some people have been on a grueling schedule, so they're delighted. They think this is the reward after years of hard work. And maybe for the first 6 months, for the first year, it is all that wonderful. But for most people, after that, depression sets in. How many hours can you watch television? It's rather boring. Being a couch potato isn't great. You don't have as many friends. You're lonely. Your spouse is around you all the time. And that can be pretty trying. So for many people, the first year and a half of retirement is a real downer. It's not as good as you thought it would be. How many times can you play pickleball and golf? And then you have to think of getting yourself out of that rut. And one of the ways that you can get yourself out of the rut is try new things, try new activities, things that maybe you hadn't done before, join clubs. And some of it you may not like, you may decide it's a total disaster. But so you've got to experiment, but you may find that there are certain things that really speak to you, and you're going to engage yourself in those. And I think there's a couple of things that people look for when they retire. They want a mission and a purpose. And very often they also want to contribute to the public good. They want to have an influence on people that is charitable. So they might mentor somebody. for example, an old friend of mine who I think was a senior VP at the railroad in the United States, CSX, he retired and they put him on all sorts of boards. And Mark was saying, this isn't retirement. This is just like worse than my own job, because here I am on these boards, but nobody listens to me. At least when I was a senior VP, people did what I told them to. And what he found greatest satisfaction was coaching a mentally handicapped kid and then becoming a docent at the Smithsonian. Go figure. This guy who had had this powerful job found that sense of purpose in helping other people, share his passion of art, and also just helping a mentally disabled kid move on. So I think that that is one of the important ingredients of a happy retirement.
So things that you would recommend people think about to make sure that they stay productive or have a vibrant retirement would be some of these examples that you just provided?
Yes, I would. Or teaching somebody something that's a passion to you. For example, if you're a great bridge player, there might be people like myself who might want to learn bridge. Teach it to us, get groups like that. And we're hoping that UB Visible will be able to be a hub where people can share some of their talents with other people as well.
So you are an expert in psychiatry, you're a psychologist, a clinical psychologist. You've been at the Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Neuroscience, and I heard you speak about, I thought it was called What's Next, actually. It was about career progressions and career planning.
Exactly, I did.
I think what you said is that a lot of people, my memory is that you said a lot of people don't think proactively about what's next and their career planning. They just sort of let it happen. And so what suggestions have you got, not just for people over the age of 65, but for people over the age of whatever, in regards to thinking about what's next?
Well, think about something that you might have wanted to do, but were too busy because you had children, your job was too busy. What might that have been? What is a trip that you might have wanted to go on? Hiking, something adventurous. Think about things that you haven't been able to do on one part of your life that now you've got the leisure, and get into it, try it out, get yourself some coach that'll help you and guide you as well.
I met a guy and interviewed a guy who said that he lost his job, but I think he was like just a couple of years shy of 60. And he said that he had been at a speech by someone who had spoken about this trek in northern Spain that goes from France all the way across northern Spain to the Atlantic Ocean.
I've heard of it. Yeah.
And it's a trek that supposedly, I think it was Peter, one of the disciples, took at some point in time, and it has a religious aspect to it, but also an athletic aspect to it, as well as a social aspect to it. And he said that it was really interesting advice. He said, Brian, make sure you've got some hiking boots and they've been worn in so that they're not going to give you a blister the first time you put them on. Make sure you've got the route mapped out and that you know what you want to do, so that if you lose your job, or if you just want to say buzz off to some boss sometime and go do something, that you've got that thing to do, that thing to look forward to, that desire of something you've always wanted to do. And he said that he had that, and he did do a couple of training hikes in the Bruce Trail, etc. And he lost his job, and he said, fine. And off he went a week later and did this trek. And while he was on the trek, he got offered a new job on a cell phone. And he said it was the smartest, best thing that he ever did, is that he had planned out this thing was going to do, this bucket list thing he was going to do if and when he lost his job. What do you think of that idea?
Right. I think that's a wonderful idea. And I'm familiar with that hike. I know people who have gone on that hike, and as well as being physically arduous, it's a very spiritual experience as well. So that is a wonderful fallback plan. But there could be lots of other things as well.
A lot of people have been watching this thing on TV, and probably you don't know about it since you diminished the TV watching a couple of minutes ago, but called The Golden Bachelor, which is about some
Yes.
70-year-old a gentleman that has, like The Bachelor, has had an opportunity to date numerous different people. And I was spoken to one person who said that this is ageism because he had other people in his 70s that were very intellectually stimulating and very compatible with him, and the last three people that he chose were all a decade younger than him, and he proved that ageism exists even with senior people because they want younger women around them. What do you think of that?
Well, I did actually watch most of that. My husband was so disgusted by that program, he couldn't bear to watch it. But one of the things I love about The Golden Bachelor, and he's 72, he makes a big deal about putting on his hearing aid. And I love that because there was no shame in it. And one of the things that happens to people as they get older, their hearing goes and they don't want to put on hearing aids. Well, that's a big mistake because not being able to hear people is very, very detrimental to social interaction. And there have been studies that show that it actually can lead to dementia. So I love the way he did that. In terms of the woman that he picked, well, she wasn't my favorite. But the thing that I disliked about it is you had 22 attractive, viable women, and they were vying for this one guy. I thought that was misogyny. It was
It'll
really...
turn around and we'll have the Golden Bachelorette next, which will be one of the runners up that'll have 20 men trying to vie for her decision.
Well, I think it'll be hard to find them. I think that's part of the point, unfortunately.
What a fascinating conversation. We're going to have to take a final break and come back with some concluding comments in just 2 minutes with Dr. Eva Klein on ageism. Stay with us, everyone. Back in 2. Well, welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. My guest tonight is Dr. Eva Klein. She is, as we've mentioned, a corporate and clinical psychologist. She's been a professor at several universities, including the Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Neuroscience at McMaster University, where I ran into her. And I've really enjoyed my interaction with her. And as I mentioned, a couple of lunches and some dinners where we were sitting at the same table at events. And one of my best friends, who regrettably has passed away, thought the world of you, and introduced us, and thought that you were. He dragged me out to a speech or two that you made, and I'm so glad he did, because they were wonderful talks that you provided. He worked with your husband at the DeGroote School of Business, Steve Cox. You've launched recently a website called ubvisible.com. The words the initials U and B, and then visible.com. And I recommend it to people to check out. Dr. Klein, we've been talking about ageism. How would you summarize, if you could, number one, why it's wrong, and number two, what we can do about it?
Well, it's wrong because it's not true. Older people are at least as vibrant as younger people. They may bring different skills to the issue, but I think it's very important that you first be visible to yourself. Don't take the perceptions of others as defining you. You can be your own worst enemy. You've got to be your cheerleader, and you've got to challenge these stereotypes and preconceived beliefs. And that includes patronizing jokes that you make about aging as well as other people. And so you've got to challenge your own assumptions, because it's good for your health, and the assumptions of others. You've got to have agency of your life. And how do you have that? Well, fashion is a very important part of it. And I'm glad you're wearing your jacket, Brian, because how you dress is a very powerful antidote to invisibility. And it's as true for men as it is for women. And the one thing that I would stress is don't choose comfort, always choose effort. Because it's so easy to be comfortable, but it's the wrong way to go about it. And then challenge yourself, get new interests, and do stuff that's new. Again, it's the same issue. Don't choose comfort. Don't do the thing that you've always done with the same people that you've always done it. Try a new experience, because what this is going to do is it's going to challenge your brain, and your brain is going to grow and develop. You can teach a dog, an old dog, new tricks, and it's going to benefit you. Now, one of the things you have to remember, happiness is not the goal. That's what we always think of when we think of comfort, but actually it won't make you happy.
This has been a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much for joining us. I really congratulate you for combating ageism and launching this You Be Visible website. And I look forward to hopefully chatting with you about it in the future. I got to ask you before we go, though, you have mentioned sex and you've talked about romance. We've talked about the Golden Bachelor. I've recently got divorced. Is there romance and sex after 60?
Well, I won't ask you how old you are, but there definitely is, and we've touched upon that. Now, I used to be a sex therapist, Brian, and it was so gratifying because people would have so many misconceptions about sex. And once they got over them, they were feeling very, very happy. So sex is important in terms of frequency. Sex is important in terms of adaptability. As you get older, you can ask for what you want, and hopefully the stereotypes of what sex should be like are gone, and so you can have much more fun together. So definitely sex can be at least as much fun after 60 as it was in your 30s, in spite of certain physical limitations. So
sounds like we're going to have another show on that topic. Dr. Eva Klein, thank you so much for joining us tonight. The website is ubvisible.com, and ageism is the issue. Dr. Klein, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks a lot. Thanks. It's been a real pleasure.
That's our show for tonight, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I remind you, I'm on every Monday through Friday at 6 o'clock on 960 AM. You can stream me online at www.saga960am.ca. All my podcasts and videos are available on my website, briancrombie.com. Good night, everybody.